Hello everyone, welcome back. In this submodule, we will understand the various stakeholders in the benthic ecosystem management. Let's begin. As we have seen, the formation and the movement of the wide graded sediment are diverse and intricate. In the process of interacting with the water flow and riverbed, the impact of the sediment on the water environment and aquatic biological community is complex. So, for example, sediment in the mountain rivers affects the water environment conditions through the absorbing and desorbing the nutrients and pollutants. The sediment plays a key role in controlling the density and diversity of the benthic and fish populations by reshaping the biological habitats through the formation of step pool system, the rip-like or the cluster-like riverbed structures under the effect of water flow. This has ecological, economical, environmental, and sociological impacts, and thus this understanding of the stakeholders is very much crucial when we talk about the benthic ecosystem management. The stakeholder engagement becomes necessary due to a wide variety of reasons. These benthic ecosystems support a wide range of economic, social, and ecological functions, which lead to diverse stakeholders' interests and concerns. These represents various sectors such as fisheries, tourism, conservation, and industry, each with its own perspective on how the benthic ecosystems should be managed. Many stakeholders, including the fishing communities and aquaculture industries, depend directly on the benthic ecosystems for their livelihood and sustenance, and their environment is crucial for management decisions to take into account their needs and their priorities of those who rely on these resources. Some other activities such as fishing, tourism, shipping, and coastal development can have adverse impacts on the benthic habitats and the species. Thus, they have the responsibility to mitigate negative impacts and promote these sustainable practices, making the engagement more sustainable. The indigenous communities and local residents can often possess the valuable traditional knowledge about the benthic ecosystems, and the local residents they can again have various knowledge about the species distribution, habitat characteristics, and ecosystem dynamics. The government agencies and regulatory bodies can play a central role in formulating and implementing policies and regulations which relate to the benthic ecosystem management. Thus, the meaningful engagement with stakeholders fosters a sense of ownership of the benthic ecosystems within the local communities. It often involves navigating the competing interests and resolving conflicts between the various stakeholders. The collaborative approaches that facilitate the dialogue, negotiation, and consensus building are essential for achieving the sustainable solutions that balance the diverse stakeholders' need and priorities. Now, when we talk about the various international agencies or regulatory bodies, these are the important ones in shaping the international laws coming to the benthic ecosystem conservation and monitoring. So the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, or the IUCN, works on effective ocean governance, which includes the processes and agreements for protecting the areas beyond the national jurisdiction. The United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Seas, that is the UN clause, has dedicated Part 12 to providing the legal protection of the marine environment. Apart from that, there are various national agencies like the US Environmental Protection Agency, which provides information on the benthic monitoring, assessment, and management. The Marine Strategy Framework Directive of the EU, they oblige its member state to assess and monitor the marine environment to achieve a good environmental status in the marine waters, which include the biodiversity and the seafloor integrity. In India, the government agencies such as the Ministry of Earth Sciences, and through its research institutions like the National Institute of Oceanography and the National Center for Coastal Research, conduct research and monitoring programs to assess the health and status of the benthic ecosystems. These programs involve studying the benthic organisms, sediment characteristics, and the ecological processes to understand the ecosystem dynamics. The data from the various government agencies might also provide information about the benthic macro invertebrate assemblages that are not typically used for academic research, but again, because agencies often select sites based on the spatially unbiased sampling designs, these surveys could provide valuable data for large-scale ecological studies. But again, despite considerable investment of time, funds, and energy, data from these surveys are rarely compared with various agencies over time. Thus, they do not contribute greatly to understanding of the various benthic ecosystem structure and the function. Also, the publicly available agency data could be used to provide basic ecological information about these benthic invertebrates, and to examine the effects of basin-wide management practices, or to track invasive species, or detect rare, threatened, and endangered species. Agencies such as the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Boards can conduct the environmental impact assessment for developmental projects that may impact the benthic ecosystems. These evaluated the potential environmental impacts of activities such as coastal infrastructure development, dredging, and industrial discharge on the benthic habitats and species. The systematic monitoring of levels of pollution is essential for these benthic ecosystems. For such an objective, the coastal ocean monitoring and prediction systems is being operated by the Department of Ocean Development in close cooperation with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, whose main aim is to assess the health of Indian marine environment and indicate the areas that require immediate and long-term remedial action. Apart from that, the industries such as shipping, oil and gas extraction, and the coastal development can directly impact the benthic ecosystems through activities such as dredging, pollution, and habitat destruction. Stakeholders in this category could include the various construction companies, port operators, developers, infrastructure planners, offshore oil refineries as well. Responsible development practices and adherence to environmental regulations are thus essential for these projects to minimize the negative impacts. Also, for say if we have the offshore wind farms, the mooring anchors and subsea cables associated with these floating platforms or the floating wind farms may function as artificial reefs by introducing some substrate that can become colonized by invertebrates and reef associated fishes. They can lead to invitation of colonization by non-native or invasive species, which can be a threat to the marine biodiversity and can have far-reaching ecological and economic consequences. Now, for the various projects, various developmental or construction projects that need to happen in the offshore regions, many countries have environmental legislation that requires a review of the potential environmental impacts of such proposed operation before a government permit can be issued. These are the environmental impact assessments, which can be defined as the process of evaluating and mitigating the physical, biophysical, social, and relevant effects of the development proposals before any major commitments are made. They are most frequently applied and potentially most useful in the cases where the country may not have well developed set of aquaculture legislation and regulations that clearly define or constrain which aquaculture operations and practices may be allowed. Such an impact assessment may include requirements for baseline assessment, site survey, effluent and carrying capacity modeling, the risk to habitats and the protected species and fish stocks among the other issues. The report typically contains an assessment of the proposed alternatives to the projects as outlined. Apart from that, there are various climate change impacts as well. So climate change decreases the salinity and increases wind disturbance in coastal areas. This decreasing of the salinity will increase in the diatomic benthic diversity but decrease their productivity. Increasing the wind disturbance will have context dependent consequences, and the abundance of the most resilient diatomic benthic assemblages will change. In India, to monitor such effects of the climate change, the Ministry of Earth Sciences can play a major role in coordinating and conducting research on the aspects of climate change, including its impact on the benthic ecosystems. The National Institute of Oceanography, Indian National Center for Ocean Informative Services, the Indian Council of Agriculture Research, Central Institute of Fisheries Education, and the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institution could conduct research on the impacts of climate change on this benthic ecosystem. The State Fisheries Department in coastal areas can also be involved in monitoring and managing marine and biotic resources. They can conduct research and surveys to assess the impact of the climate change and then formulate policies for sustainable management of these benthic ecosystems. Then we have a lot of effects on the coral health as well. The coral reefs are exposed to increased environmental pressures from local and global impacts. This facilitates a shift from the coral to algae dominated reef systems, which are accompanied by the increase in environmental pressures, which lead to a lot of microbial communities dominated by opportunists and pathogens. Thus, an enhanced predictive capability is required for monitoring the coral reef health and locally managing the environmental pressures such as water quality and its effect on the coral health. Fisheries and aquaculture is another major stakeholders that are the benthic ecosystem management is concerned about. So the benthic taxa, especially the dominant megafaunal components of these deep sea systems such as the corals and sponges, can be highly vulnerable to fishing impacts. Some of these have natural resilience due to the shape, size and structure, and some can survive in natural refuges which are inaccessible to trolls. But fishing with bottom trawls has extensive effects on a majority of these benthic life and threatens seafloor integrity. It also impacts the areas which are not directly trawled, since this suspended sediment can travel far away. Recent research on the bottom trawling effects points to the need on establishing larger trawl-free areas to protect the sensitive ecosystems and live up to principle of ecosystem-based management. The government should also pay attention to the various local institutions by providing a reinforcement to the various fishing communities to empower them without having to bring outside agencies. The rural poor fishermen can be helped by adopting a multiple income strategies. It is recommended to train and educate the members with good skills so that the businesses can be managed properly to increase the income of the fishing communities. Skill addition could be done to make them understand the effects on the benthic ecosystem and understand how they can mitigate the negative impacts. So when coming to India, this fisheries plays a very important role. On an average, India is the third largest fish producing country that accounts for 7.56% of global food production. Apart from this, it is the second largest fish producer after China through aquaculture. Almost 60% of Indians consume fish in their diet. This increase in consumption results in an increase in the Indian fishing industry. There are 10 states that outshine the fisheries when compared to the rest of India, like Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, Gujarat, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Goa, Odisha, Karnataka and Maharashtra. Hence, fish farming in India has a huge scope in the near future and with lot of income opportunities and profitability, and hence understanding the effect of fishing and aquaculture on the benthic ecosystem and vice versa is too much crucial. Many times the non-governmental organizations to aid in the benthic ecosystem management. These NGOs can raise awareness about the importance of benthic ecosystems and the need for their conservation. By engaging in advocacy efforts, they promote the inclusion of the benthic ecosystem assessment in environmental agendas, policies, and conservation effective initiatives. They conduct the scientific research and monitoring programs focused on benthic ecosystems. They provide training and capacity building programs for local communities, scientists, and stakeholders involved in the benthic ecosystem assessment. They often collaborate with government agencies, academic institutions, and other stakeholders to conduct collaborative benthic ecosystem assessment. By fostering the partnerships, NGOs can leverage expertise, resources, and networks to enhance the scope and effectiveness of the assessment initiatives. Through educational programs, workshops, publication, and outreach events, they inform the public about the threat to the benthic ecosystems and empower individuals to take action to protect them. Overall, the NGOs can contribute scientific expertise, community engagement, advocacy, and conservation efforts to promote the sustainable management and conservation of these valuable marine habitats. The taxonomic obstacle, as we have discussed, also leads to the incompleteness of the marine biodiversity data collected from near the Indian coast. Neither have all the habitats in the region been examined to the full potential. So due to this, there are very few targeted taxonomic surveys, and it is impossible to compare the databases that are currently directly available. There are very few experts on the marine invertebrates in India despite the diversity of flora and fauna. Little funding is available for taxonomic research. The lack of such biological data necessitates the use of exemplars. Most parts of the Indian marine environment are poorly sampled or unsampled for the vertebrates, especially in the deep sea, offshore islands, species such as seamounts. Most of the data relating to marine invertebrates remain in the offline mode. For example, the degradation and decline in the mangrove and coral species can be studied to comprehend the anthropogenic disturbances. This demonstrates the far-reaching effects of marine pollution on the diversity. Thus, various training programs can be conducted by various research institutions, various educational institutions. By having various industry training programs as well, we can build a proper public and the community engagement. Now, such changes in the ocean atmosphere, in the ocean temperature and acidity are among the effects of climate change that have led to a significant impact on the global marine ecosystems. For example, the Gulf of Mexico, one of the largest dead zones, has oxygen levels too low for marine life. The scientists had warned local officials and legislators for years, but they had refused to take action, which caused severe damage to the marine ecosystem and fishing communities. There are also like various harmful algal blooms in the Lake Erie, which have posed a threat to the lake's ecosystem and local tourism and fishery industry. In India also, the rapid coastal development in Goa has led to the devastation of various habitats in the beaches as well. The lack of diversity and data lead to challenges in assessing the extent of damage to these habitats and developing effective management strategies. In recent years, many of Mumbai's beaches have become severely contaminated with plastic refuse and other materials which render them unfit for recreational use. The Bay of Bengal has also witnessed several oil spills which have significantly affected marine environment and local fishing communities. In 2015, for instance, a chemical plant in the city of Chennai discharged toxic effluent into the Ennore Creek, causing mortality of various of the benthic fauna and thousands of fish, which negatively impacted the livelihoods of local fishermen. So there are such various kind of incidents that have occurred, and that's why the benthic ecosystem needs to be given utmost priority when we talk about the sediment management as well. So the assessing the benthic ecosystems in Indian Ocean using acoustics involves various innovative techniques and methodologies. We can leverage the idea of the underwater domain awareness, the marine spatial planning to come up and understand the various interactions of the benthic ecosystem and the sediment transport and the deposition rates. The acoustic data can be used to get insight into the ecological interactions that are there between benthic communities and the various fish populations. Underwater imaging systems such as the towed cameras, ROVs, AUVs can capture high resolution visual images of these benthic habitats and organisms, which facilitate the qualitative assessment of the health of the ecosystem, biodiversity and habitat complexity. Integrating multiple acoustics techniques with traditional field surveys, remote sensing data and oceanographic measurements can allow for a comprehensive benthic ecosystem management. Combining acoustic data with biological, chemical and physical parameter would enhance our understanding of the ecosystem structure, function and resilience of the benthic community in the Indian Ocean region. Thus, with this quote, I'll end the discussion here. Thank you everyone.